Andy here, and this week I tried to make some music for a single. Did I succeed? Find out in this week's episode. Hello, Andy here, and welcome to another episode of my vlog where I'm documenting my starting a career in music and how I'm going to make a living off that music. In this week's episode, I'm looking at the kind of creative journey and how it transpires. My problem is I am literally starting my career in music in that I have no music. I've got some unfinished music. In fact, I've got lots of unfinished music, but I've got nothing that's commercially available out there at the moment, apart from one track, which you can find on Spotify. The track is up there because I'm promoting a playlist called Deep Underground Bumpy Rollers, and the track is called Bumpy Rollers, and it's just a way of tying those two things together. But apart from that, I don't have anything. Like a lot of electronic music producers, solo artists, it's very difficult for me to get a process going where I'm creating music that I'm also happy with. And I, amongst others, struggle with this endlessly. I've alluded in previous episodes to the amount of unfinished work that I have on hard drives, and that's it. It's just unfinished work, and some of it could be really, really good. And more importantly, the fact that there is this glut of stuff creates this psychological barrier to going forward with more work. Now, I didn't come up with any of these ideas of these psychological barriers. A lot of this is I've read in various music making help guides, and one of the most brilliant that I've come across is by a guy called Mike Monday, who is a musician, composer and producer. He's got a really good channel on YouTube, with tons and tons of content. He does live mentoring of some of his students that he has, because he also runs some online courses. And no, Mike, I have not subscribed to him yet. I can't afford it. But I have viewed Mike's YouTube channel a lot, and looked at what he proposes about these ideas of these mental states, and it's been so useful to me to think about where I am in my music creation process and how I can then go forward and turn this into something where, yes, I'm producing music, and more importantly, I'm producing music that I'm really happy with and that I don't mind sharing with the world. One of the things Mike is strong on is this idea of having the various stages of music creation, and at the very start of it he has these ideas, or what he calls splurges, where you are literally just playing your instrument, whatever that be, and getting that creativity out there, and then you record that somehow. It's very important, the recording process, both orally and in written word, where you can reference stuff and you can go back to it. And then you go forward into other phases like editing and polishing and all that stuff. And he is a strong user of Trello, which is a business management tool for keeping track of projects, definitely for collaboration. And he has this Trello board, which he calls his, I think he calls it his musical magical machine or something. But basically you put your projects into various cards, and then you can move them about, you can label them, you can see exactly where you are. And what's really useful for me is to be able to then listen very quickly to what I have previously done. So I don't know if you can see that, that's the Trello board, and I render all the WAVs that I bounce out, just a very rough mix, and I render them out. And then I'm still rocking Ableton 9, so I can't render them out as MP3s. And Trello, unless you pay for it, has a file size limitation for attachments. So I render my little files to MP3 and then I upload them. You won't be able to see the file structure, but I use the very wonderful Foobar 2000, which is shareware, freeware, premiumware. I can't remember what it is. I know I have donated for it. I'm sure I have. If I haven't, I will do. It's a music playing utility. It's great, and what it enables you to do is to convert files really quickly. It's a set preset rate, 192 kilobits per second for MP3s, but that's great just so I can get them into Trello. And the beauty about it is you can do it while the track's actually playing. Genius. So there you go, I'm converting that file, and then I'll load it as an attachment into the relevant card on my Trello board with some, funky comments telling me what I did and why I did it, and it's just great. It's a really, really good way of keeping track of your progress. It's inspiring, that's what it is. I've uploaded it to the relevant Trello card for this track, which is, the working title is Moonkicks. And now I can add a little comment and just let me know what I'm thinking, what my thoughts are at the end of a session day. So that's what I do with Trello, following Mike Monday's advice, and I'm gleaning this all from his excellent YouTube channels, and he has some free downloads as well. If you are a music producer, it's really good. I mentioned the track reanimator in last week's episode, and that's a way of going back to an old track and highlighting the bits that are important and then moving forward. So it's just a gold mine of really useful information, and I thoroughly recommend you check it out, and thank you, Mike. Every week I set myself a task in these episodes, and then I revisit the task in the next episode. So the last 2 weeks of tasks have been creating music to release as a single. I have a self-imposed release date of the 25th of September, and I'm gearing towards that, and I still don't have any music, or I don't have any music that I'm happy with until I started to implement Mike's strategies. So I'm going to take you through where I'm at with all that now. I'm in Trello now, which is a business management collaboration tool, and I'm using the example set out by Mike Monday, and I found it so useful. In Trello you have boards that you associate with a certain project, so this is my board for my music creation. As you can see, I have all the cards laid out in various columns. So I've got my splurge column, and then I've got another column called rework, which is old tracks. They're not splurges because they're not music I've recently created, but they're old stuff. So I've put it in this column called rework. And then stuff that I'm currently working on to a greater extent. Now that's might not be how Mike runs his boards, but that's what I've gleaned from looking at YouTube videos, and it suits me. It's a good creative process, and that's it for me. It's having some kind of process, because previously, as a lot of producers, you just have hard drives full of tunes, and if you have an idea, you think, I'll work on this, and by the time you found it, and then, have you got an MP3 of it you can just quickly listen to, or do you have to load the whole track up, and then you load the whole track up and you find a plugin's gone out of date or whatever, and then 2 hours later you still haven't loaded up the track because you're dealing with loads of problems from legacy versions and all sorts of stuff, and your creativity just goes bye. This process really helps me keep focused. So I'm just going to guide you through the process of what I've been doing with this track ST07, which I played a bit of it for you in last week's episode. So when you create a card, you have the option to do all this stuff, which is probably the reason I never use Trello, and Mike's obviously gone to a great deal of time to research a good tool, or he might have seen someone using Trello and thought, oh yeah, you can do stuff. The best thing about it is you can put attachments in, which is great. And I've said before that at the end of every session I try without fail to create an MP3 of just what I've done of that thing and label it, so I've got this ongoing record. So you can see from the card that there's been quite a lot of work on this track. Starting with the original demo back from a project I did in 2019. as I explained in last week's episode, it's got that sample in, which is from the Mahavishnu Orchestra, however you want to say it. And clearing samples is a costly process. I have to approach both the owner of the sound recording, the record company, and the composers and see if they want me to use their sample, if they'll let me use their sample, and there will be a fee to pay. And I haven't got the money to that, I haven't got the time. So as part of the creative process, it's a shame, but also as part of the creative process, it kind of makes you think, all right, well, I need to create something original. So that was the original demo. I know I need to replace the sample. What happened next? So then I went for a rework. So I opened up the project file and let's have a listen to what I did. So I've obviously found a similar sample from somewhere and put that in. Then I was seeking inspiration for lyrics. I've become conscious that most dance music, electronic music for the dance floor is instrumental, and yet people respond to vocals. Vocal tracks do well, but not being cynical just because they do well, or I want to include vocals. But there's obviously an emotional element to hearing a vocal in music. So I was thinking about lyrics. Now, I don't write lyrics, I've never written lyrics, and I can't sing. So, problem number one. But it's always good to have some inspiration. And there was an article written in The Guardian after various political turmoils here in the UK. So that guided me to thinking about, right, these are elements that I could perhaps incorporate, either finding a vocalist and or creating my own vocal samples. The beauty about Trello is that I could save that article in here. I use Evernote as well. And I use Evernote all the time for everything, to store notes, and you can link your Trello to your Evernote. And I'm not trying to sell Trello here, it's just it makes the whole process of being creative more streamlined. In trying to find a vocalist, it helps obviously if you have some ideas yourself that you could perhaps play them to say, this is what I'm thinking. So I did sit down and, based on that article and thoughts I have, write some lyrics, and I put a guide vocal down over what I've done. So you might want to cover your ears at this point. Move over some vocalist, and again I'm bouncing down the idea every night, and so I've got this record, and with Trello you can leave comments and checklists and all sorts, and it's a really good process. It's really helped me out. So at this point I listened to the music I'd written and I didn't like it. I felt it was too melodic, which is a weird thing, even though I'm trying to go for vocals. I decided that wasn't perhaps my strength at this time, and so I would reduce it back to something that's more dance floor, less melodic, and so basically took the first chord of the progression and just repeated that to create that more driving feel. So that was my day 4. So then I worked with my mystery vocalist to try and recreate samples and get those ideas together. And this is where the whole thing about technology comes into play, where you don't have to be in the same room. Using technologies such as Dropbox and Splice and all these musical collaboration tools, I was able to ask someone to sing along to a track that I prepared, get the vocal stems back, and they're really well recorded, and then drop them into tracks so I could then manipulate them. and so on and so forth, going through that process until I've eventually ended up with a track called The Will to Fight, and it's more of a remix. It's an imaginary remix, if you will, of a track. So there you go, that was the process of creating The Will to Fight and documenting it using Trello. Now, this is supposed to be the single. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Yeah, so this week's task is then to finish music that I'm happy with, or take a view on it and extend the deadline and perhaps put my release date into October to give me a couple more weeks with which to finish the music, and also more time for the tasks once I've finished the music that I alluded to in previous episodes. And they're basically to do with lead times when you're hitting vlogs and blogs and music magazines. So that's all from me for this week. I hope you have a good week, and if you've liked what you've seen today, then please subscribe to the channel and set your notifications on, and you can see other videos and you can see what I've been doing so far in this documentation of my music career. Thanks a lot.